Queen Loreth stood tall in the royal court of the Zarethian Empire, wearing her long silver robe and the crown that once symbolized power, grace, and loyalty. Her glowing violet eyes held back tears, even as her people turned their faces away. In silence, she had always served her people with dignity. But today, all of that meant nothing. King Vorkal, her husband, stood before the court with cold eyes and an even colder heart. His voice echoed across the throne room like a blade cutting through flesh. She has failed the empire. She can no longer bear heirs. She is defective. She is useless. Loreth felt the words strike her chest like bullets. She opened her mouth to speak, to defend herself, but the guards had already stepped forward. Orcs didn't look at her, not even once. She is to be stripped of title, name, and honor, effective immediately, just like that, the queen. Was no more guards dragged her out of the hall like a criminal. No one protested, not even her loyal handmaidens. Betrayal burned in her veins, hotter than any fire, all because her body had rejected the ancient fertility serum used by royal bloodlines. It wasn't her fault, it was nature. But in the Zarethian Empire, a queen who could not produce an heir was as good as dead. She was sent to prison Moon V-17, forgotten rock floating in a silent corner of space. It wasn't a prison, it was a dumping ground for traitors, rebels, and the unwanted. The cell was small, made of cold black stone. No bed, no light, no voice. Loreth sat in the corner, knees pulled to her chest, her crown replaced by chains. Days passed, maybe weeks. Time didn't matter anymore. She stopped counting. She stopped speaking. There was no one to listen anyway. Then the silence broke. A loud crash echoed through the corridor. Boots yelling, and then the metal door slammed open. She looked up slowly, eyes wide with shock. A human male was thrown into her cell like garbage. His face was bruised, one eye nearly swollen shut. His hands were tied, but he still managed to spit on the floor in defiance. The guards laughed. "Enjoy your new roommate, Queen of Nothing." The door slammed shut again. The man groaned and sat against the opposite wall. For a moment, they just stared at each other. "You don't look like a rebel," Human finally said. "And you don't smell like a soldier," she replied, her voice dry from silence. He smirked despite the pain. "Name's Elias Shaw. Special Forces. Or at least I used to be." She hesitated, then replied softly, "Loreth." He looked confused. "That's supposed to mean something?" "It used to." Elias frowned but didn't ask further. Instead, he leaned his head back and closed his eyes. That night, neither of them spoke again. But something had changed. For the first time in weeks, Loreth didn't feel completely alone. The next day, she offered him half her food. He looked at her suspiciously, but took it anyway. "You don't talk like the other Zarethians?" said while eating. "I'm not like them anymore," she whispered. He glanced at her, really looked at her this time, and saw the sadness she tried to hide. He didn't know her story. She didn't know his. But here, on a forgotten prison moon, where no one cared if they lived or died, two broken souls had crossed paths, and though neither of them realized it yet, this moment would change the fate of two worlds forever. Days passed in silence, broken only by the clanking of boots and the opening of cell doors for food delivery. Loreth and Elias sat on opposite sides of the cell, strangers forced to share space in a world that had forgotten both of them. Elias watched Loreth quietly. She moved with grace, even in rags. Her silver hair was tangled, and the proud glow in her violet eyes had dimmed. But she still held her back straight, like a queen who refused to break no matter what. He respected that. But he also knew pain when he saw it. He saw it in her trembling hands when she ate, heard it in the quiet sobs she tried to muffle at night. And though he never said anything, it pulled at something deep inside him. One day, while scraping old dirt off the cell floor, Elias finally spoke. "You said your name was Loreth, right?" She looked up surprised. "Yes. Why are you here?" he asked. Loreth hesitated. Her throat felt dry. She hadn't told anyone, not even herself. but something about Elias's voice. His eyes made her want to speak. "I was queen of the Zarethian Empire," she said softly. Elias blinked. "A queen? In this dump?" She nodded. "My husband, the king, abandoned me because I couldn't give him children. He called me useless, and he threw me here like trash." Elias stared at her. For once, he didn't crack a joke. He didn't laugh. He just nodded slowly. "Damn," he said. "That's cold." A bitter smile touched her lips. "You think?" He chuckled, and for the first time, she smiled too. That night they talked more. Elias told her about Earth's last stand against the Empire. How he had led a team of resistance fighters. Most of them died. How he was captured and tortured before being sent here. "We were outgunned, outmatched," he said. "But we fought anyway, because Earth doesn't kneel." Larath listened with growing interest. She had never heard humans described this way. Back in the palace, they were called primitive, emotional, chaotic, but this man was strong, clever, and human in a way she never saw before. The next day, the guards returned with batons. Pulling Elias from the cell, Larath stood quickly. "Where are you taking him?" "None of your business, traitor queen," the guard spat. Elias gave her a tired smile. "Don't worry, I've had worse beatings." He was gone for hours. When he came back, his shirt was torn, and his lip was bleeding. Larath rushed to him, helping him sit. "Why did they do this to you?" he groaned. "'Cause I told them what I think of their empire." She reached for some water and helped clean his wounds. Her fingers were soft, and her eyes filled with worry. Elias looked at her, confused by her kindness. "You don't have to do this," he whispered. "I know," she said gently, "but I want to." In that moment, something shifted. The coldness between them began to melt. Over the next few days, they grew closer. They shared food, stories, even laughter. Larath would lean against Elias while he slept. Sometimes he would brush her hair with his fingers. Untangling the knots, they were still prisoners, still broken, but now, not alone. Then one night, alarms screamed through the prison, lights flashed red, prisoners shouted, a riot had begun. Elias stood pulling Larath behind him. "Stay close to me," he said. "We're getting out of here." "But how?" asked, heart pounding. He looked back at her with a grin. "I've escaped worse places than this, the middle of chaos, fear, and fire." One thing became clear: Elias was more than just a soldier. And to Larath, he was starting to become something far more dangerous. Flames danced across the hallway walls. Prisoners were screaming, guards were shouting, and sirens echoed like a war cry in the air. The riot had begun, and Elias Shaw knew this was their one chance. He grabbed Larath's hand and pulled her into the chaos. "Stay behind me," he said. "Ow, whatever happens, don't let go." Her fingers tightened around his. Even though fear gripped her chest, she nodded. Elias moved fast, ducking under falling debris and dodging panicked prisoners. The prison lights flickered, casting shadows across blood-stained walls. He moved like a soldier, precise and alert. Larath followed, heart pounding, mind racing. They reached a control room. Single guards stood inside, trying to seal the doors. Before he could react, Elias tackled him to the floor and knocked him out. "Help me find the override switch," Elias shouted. Larath scanned the controls. Though her fingers trembled, her mind remembered the old training from her days as Queen How to control systems, how to read alien code. She pressed a few buttons, and suddenly the security doors unlocked with a loud hiss. "You did it," Elias said, smiling through the sweat and blood on his face. "No," she replied, breathing hard. "We did it." They ran through the now open corridor, dodging stunned guards and fighting prisoners. As they reached the docking bay, 2 guards appeared with plasma rifles. "Freeze." Elias stepped in front of Larath, arms raised, eyes sharp. "Don't do this." The guards didn't listen. They fired. Elias grabbed a loose metal shield and deflected one blast. The other shot missed by inches. He threw the shield, knocking one guard to the ground. Larath, without thinking, picked up the guard's fallen weapon and fired at the second. The blast hit him in the leg. He dropped, screaming. Loreth stood frozen, staring at the weapon in her hand. I've never hurt anyone before, Elias. Placed a hand on her shoulder. He would have killed you. You didn't have a choice. Her hand shook, but she nodded slowly. Something inside her was changing. They entered the hangar, filled with broken ships and rusting parts. Elias found a small cargo shuttle, dusty but intact. He climbed into the pilot's seat and began flipping switches. You know how to fly? Loreth asked. He smirked. Enough to crash less than I used to. The engines roared to life. Loreth took the co-pilot seat. Sss. As the shuttle rose off the ground, more guards burst in, firing at them. Sparks flew around the cockpit. Elias gritted. His teeth. Hold on. The ship blasted out of the hangar, past the moon's surface, into the black sea of stars. Prison Moon V-17 became a distant behind them. Silence filled the shuttle for a moment. Then Elias let out a shaky breath. We did it, he whispered. Loreth stared out the window, tears in her eyes. We're free. But the peace didn't last long. A red light blinked on the dashboard. They've marked us, Elias said. We're being tracked. They'll send hunters. Loreth closed her eyes. She wasn't surprised. The king would never allow her to live freely. Then we run, she said. We hide. We survive. Elias turned to her, seeing strength in her face for the first time. She wasn't just a fallen queen anymore. Are you ready for that? He asked. She looked into his eyes. As long as you're with me. Yes. Elias nodded. Then we stay alive. Together. Stars stretched before them, full of danger. And unknowns. But they weren't the same people who had entered that prison. Now, they were something more. Something stronger. The stars looked peaceful. But danger hid behind their beauty. Elias and Loreth flew through space in the stolen shuttle, heading toward the outer zones of the galaxy. The engine hummed quietly now, patched up with wires and luck. They had no official papers, no safety, and no home. But they had each other, and for now, that was enough. They landed on Zeros. A lawless mining world filled with smugglers, traders, and people who didn't ask questions. The air was thick with smoke and metal dust. Loreth covered her face with a scarf, hiding her identity. Elias wore an old pilot jacket and limped slightly from a past injury. The streets were crowded, loud, and dangerous. But after the cold silence of prison, it felt alive. In a small hidden tavern, they found a woman named Micah, leader of a small rebel group. Elias had heard of her during his missions. She once helped free hundreds of slaves from Zerethian control. She hates the Empire more than anyone, Elias whispered to Loreth before entering. Inside, Micah sat at a table with glowing red eyes and steel-covered arms. Her voice was sharp. You're lucky I don't shoot strangers on sight. Elias raised his hands. I come with an offer, and a friend you'll want to meet. When Micah turned and saw Loreth, her eyes narrowed. I know that face. You're the queen who stood by while your people enslaved mine. Loreth's chest tightened. She stepped forward, slowly. I was silent, and I regret it, but I am not that woman anymore. Why should I believe you? Because the king destroyed me too. He called me useless and left me to die. I've seen the truth now. I want to fight back. Micah didn't speak for a moment. Then she said, Words are cheap, former queen. Prove yourself. And so, Loreth and Elias stayed. For weeks, they worked with Micah's rebels. They lived in old underground tunnels, helped deliver supplies, and repaired broken tech. Loreth learned to fire weapons, repair engines, and speak to people who once feared her at first. The rebels treated her with cold eyes and stiff silence. But over time, they saw her work harder than anyone. They saw her hands bleed, her voice guide, and her heart change. One night, after a long supply run, Elias and Loreth sat alone under the sky. You're not the same woman I met in that prison, Elias said softly. Loreth looked at him, the firelight dancing in her violet eyes. You're the reason I survived. You taught me how to fight, not just with weapons, but with my soul, he smiled. You had that strength all along. Loreth placed her hand over his. Elias, I've never trusted anyone the way I trust. You? He didn't reply with words, Instead, he leaned forward and kissed her gently. It was not rushed. It's not forced, it was real. For the first time in her life, she wasn't kissing a king or a ruler. She was kissing a man who saw her not as a queen, but as a person, a woman, someone worth loving. When their lips parted, they sat quietly, the stars above them shining like tiny promises. But peace never lasted long. The next morning, a message buzzed on Micah's old cum system, a bounty alert, Queen Loreth. 500,000 credits. Dead or alive? Elias read it and looked at her. They know you're alive. Loreth's hands clenched into fists. Then let them come. Micah entered the room, smiling. Good, because we've been waiting for a reason to strike. So, the useless queen became something newer. Symbol of rebellion. And beside her stood the human who gave her heart a reason to beat again. Lorethi stood in the center of the rebel camp, no longer wearing royal robes or expensive jewelry. She wore a dark uniform made from scraps, boots covered in dust, and her once perfect silver hair now tied back in a rough braid. But there was power in her eyes, real power, not given by a crown, but earned through pain and fire for the first time in her life. People were listening to her not because they feared her title, but because they respected her voice. The bounty on her head had spread across the galaxy. Hunters, mercenaries, and loyalists of the king had begun searching every planet. The rebels knew they had little time. They had to move fast before the Empire found them. Loreth stood before the group of fighters, her voice clear. We were all thrown away by the Empire. They called me useless. They broke my body. But they couldn't break my will. We are not weak. We are not lost. We are many. And we will make them hear us. The camp echoed with cheers. Even the coldest rebels nodded. Elias stood at the back, arms crossed, a proud smile on his face. She was made for this. He whispered to himself. Under her leadership, the rebels grew stronger. Loreth used her knowledge of royal systems to unlock old codes, smuggle weapons, and contact other hidden groups. She sent secret messages across the stars' calls to rise, to fight, to stand. The galaxy was listening. Then came a reply from the D. Planet Hayland 3. Message returned. A group of exiles Zarethians who had been punished for speaking against the king wanted to join her cause. Loreth, Elias, and a small team flew to the planet in a stolen transport ship. There, in the deep caves, they met warriors, engineers, even scholars. One of them was an old tutor of Loreth's, a kind-eyed man named Saran. I thought you were dead, Saran said, tears in his eyes. I was, Loreth replied, but someone brought me back. She looked at Elias, who simply nodded. That night, around the fire, the two sat together. You've become a leader, Elias said, gently touching her hand. I've become myself, she replied. For the first time, dangerous. When the Empire strikes back, it won't be small teams. They'll send fleets. I know, she whispered, but I'm not afraid anymore. Elias leaned closer. Whatever happens, I'm with you. Her eyes softened. Even if we fall. He kissed her forehead. Then we fall together. Back at the rebel base, Loreth made a decision. No longer hide in the shadows. She would no longer let the Empire control the story. She walked into the small recording room with Micah and Elias. Beside her, the camera blinked on. Across thousands of systems, her face appeared. It's known as the beautiful Queen of the Empire. Now she stood with scars, fire, and truth. I am Loreth, once Queen of the Zarethian Empire. My voice was taken. My worth was denied. But I survived. And now I fight. If you are tired of fear, join us. If you are ready to break your chains, rise. We are not few. We are many. And the Empire will hear us. The message spread like wildfire. Hope, once buried, was rising again. And in the eyes of a forgotten queen and a human soldier, a love and rebellion had found their voice. The message Loreth sent reached far beyond what anyone expected. Across the galaxy, people watched in silence. Some cried, Some clenched their fists, and some, especially those forgotten by the Empire, answered the call. Within weeks, rebel ships began arriving. Not many, not strong, but full of courage. Fighters from ruined colonies, smugglers seeking redemption, even a few former soldiers of the Empire. Tired of following cruel orders, Loretha stood on the command deck of their new base, which was hidden inside an old mining station on an abandoned moon. She watched small ships land one by one. Elias joined her. "This is it. We're no longer running." "No," she said firmly, "we're going home." Their plan was dangerous, maybe impossible. But Loreth knew they had one chance to break the Empire's hold. Attack the royal palace on Zarethia Prime. Micah, now her battle commander, gave the warning. "The king still has the High Fleet. He'll crush us if we fail." "We won't fail," Loreth said. "Not this time." The rebels trained day and night. Elias taught them tactics from Earth's wars. Loreth led strategy meetings using everything she once learned inside the palace. She remembered every hidden tunnel, every weak point in the shield systems the day of the attack arrived, as rebel ships jumped into hyperspace. Silence filled the main deck. Loreth looked at her reflection in the dark glass. No crown, no silk, only armor and fire in her heart. Elias walked over, placing something in her hand, a small metal pin shaped like a phoenix. "It was from my squad," he said. "We used to wear it before every final mission." Loreth held it tightly. "Thank you." He leaned closer. "If we make it out, I want to start a life with you. Not as a queen, just as Loreth." Her eyes softened, "and I will say yes." Their ship reached orbit above Zarethia Prime. The Empire's fleet waited like giants in the dark sky. As alarms screamed, the battle began. The rebels struck with speed and surprise. Small ships zipped through gaps in the Empire's defense. Explosions lit the stars like fireflies. Elias, flying one of the lead ships, guided the attack toward the palace shield generator. Loreth was on the ground with her team. Blaster in hand, she led a charge through the old tunnels beneath the palace. It was strange to walk those halls. Again this time, not as a queen, but as a warrior, at the central chamber. She came face to face with King Vorkal. He still wore his golden robe. Sitting on the throne like he had not destroyed her life, his voice was calm, cruel. "So, the broken queen returns." "I'm not broken," she said, raising her weapon. "I'm reborn," he laughed. "You'll never win. You are nothing." She lowered her gun, stepping closer. "Then why are you afraid of me?" His eyes narrowed. Before he could order the guards, a loud boom echoed. The shield generator exploded. Elias had succeeded. Rebel forces stormed the palace. A battle broke out in the throne room. Loreth fought alongside her people, striking down guards with precision. And Grace, she didn't kill the king. She captured him and forced him to stand before the people he had once ruled with fear. Later, as the city lit up with celebration, Loreth stood on the palace balcony. Cheers rose from below. Elias joined her. "You did it?" "We did," she said with a smile. "My offer still stands," he said softly. "A life with me." She took his hand. "And my answer is still yes." In that moment, the stars above seemed brighter, not because of the battle, not because of victory, but because a forgotten queen and a human soldier had given the galaxy something it had lost. Wait. The war was over, but the galaxy still trembled in silence. The once mighty Zarethian Empire had fallen not with the roar of power, but with the quiet strength of a woman they once called useless. Queen Loreth, now a symbol of freedom, walked through the broken halls of the royal palace. The gold had faded, the walls were scarred, but the people, they were free. That was what mattered. Crowds gathered outside. Refugees, rebels, workers, and citizens from different worlds all. Watching, all waiting. Not for a queen, but for a leader they could trust. Inside, a council meeting was held. Representatives from human colonies, alien tribes, and even former imperial officers sat at one table. Micah spoke first. They want you to rule, Loreth. You earned it. Loreth looked down at her hands.
Ow.
They no longer wore rings of power. They were calloused from battle, stained with effort. She shook her head slowly. I don't want to be their ruler, she said. I want to be their voice. One of many. Leah stood beside her, arms folded, pride in his eyes. Then what do we build? A council, she said. A place where every voice matters. Not just royalty, not just warriors, but the healers, the mothers, the dreamers, everyone. The room went quiet, and then one by one they nodded. New era had begun. Outside, as the sun rose over the capital city, Loreth stepped onto the balcony where her old life had ended. But this time, she was not in chains. This time, she was not alone. Elias stood beside her, holding her hand. Micah stood to her right. Thousands below cheered, not for a throne, but for peace. Loreth took the mic. Her voice was steady. Once I was called a queen. Then I was called nothing. But today, I am one of you. And together, we will build something better. The crowd erupted into applause. Some cried, some smiled. Some simply stood in awe. Later, in the quiet of the old garden behind the palace, Elias and Loreth sat on a stone bench. Flowers had begun to grow again. The air was soft and warm. Elias turned to her. So, no more empires? She laughed gently. No more empires. And us? He asked. What are we now? Loreth looked into his eyes, her heart full. We're free, we're alive, and we love. Kissed her forehead. Sounds perfect to me. She rested her head on his shoulder. Used to think love was a luxury, something only the lucky ones had. But now I know it's the reason I survived. You're not just a survivor, he whispered. You're the woman who changed everything. The stars above glowed quietly, as if watching their moment. She closed her eyes, no longer a prisoner, no longer a tool for power, no longer a forgotten. Queen She was Loreth, loved by a human, respected by many, and finally, completely free.